Well, now that we have created a basic web app on the Cloud Shell, now what I'm going to jump into is how to configure your application settings. So in that, you can go to configurations, then application settings. I wish I had a demo to show how to do this. Let's try do that in the background somewhere. Let's see. Okay, cool. I'll create that. So in that, what happens is you go to what you call configurations. Then under configurations, you go to um, you then go to application settings. That. So you go to app settings. App settings and app services are passed as environment variables to the application code. For Linux, custom container app settings are passed using the -inf flag. For .NET and .NET Core apps, app settings in app service are like setting in web config or app setting, app setting, app setting. Okay. Spelling mistake. So it's app settings at the JSON, but app service overrides values in app settings and that. So if you have something in here that has what do you call it, an app setting of some sort, and you configure this on the portal to have environment variables in app settings on the environment variables, everything in app settings is overwritten by everything that you have configured on the app setting itself. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. I'm just trying to set up that. Just a sec. Web app test. I'm just using a stack there. You. Okay. Create. Just creating that on the background. Then in here we have in a default or custom Linux container, any nested JSON key structure in the app settings value should be represented like that, and needs to be configured in app service as with a double underscore. So instead of using the semicolon, which we normally use in Windows, we use a we use a double underscore to represent, the nesting of objects essentially. Configure connection strings. For .NET and ASP core developers, the values you set in app setting overrides the values in your web config. For other language stacks, it's better to use app settings instead because connection strings require special formatting in the variable keys in order to access the values. Connection strings are always encrypted when stored stored. So encrypted at rest. That's what they are telling us there. Then, yep. Then they say there is one case where you may want to use connection strings instead of app settings for non.NET languages. Certain Azure database types are backed up along with the app only if you configure a connection string for the database in your app service. So if you wanted your app to be backed up with your database, along with your database, you need to set up the connection string there, essentially. So, so there, what I was doing in the background was, what do you call? Just want to close that. I was setting up this particular app service. Under that, what we have or what we were going through was configurations. Under configurations, you would have what's going on. It's still loading. Under configurations, you'd have app settings. Under app settings, these are effectively your app settings. So this is app settings on the top. These are connection strings when we talk about configuring connection strings. Cool. So configure general settings, essentially that's exactly what we were talking about currently available settings. So you can do stack settings essentially. So tell us what stack you'll be using, either .NET, Python, and all of that. You can do platform settings. So platform settings lets you configure the hosting platform, including the type. Let's say if you are doing a 64 or 32-bit type of Bitness application, you can set up your WebSockets. You can set up always on. So this is when you don't want your application to go down. So by default, apps unload after 20 minutes on no traffic. So if there's no traffic for 20 minutes, the web app unloads. So if you wanted to use web jobs or jobs that are triggered by a cron, you typically want to have this enabled. So you have managed pipeline version, classic. Okay, that I don't know what that was. HTTP version. So you can set up the HTTP version that you wanted to support. ARR affinity, that ensures that requests for the same session lifetime are sent to the same instance in multi-instance deployment. Can set off for stateless applications. So if your application is stateless and you don't want the user to be directed to the same instance, you could disable that. So that's what I was talking about. So general settings. Ooh, general settings is effectively this tab. When you come here, as we mentioned, you can set up a stack. So if I wanted to change this, I could change it to, let's say, Python. Then bit mapping doesn't allow that there. Okay, but let me just do that. And I want to make this at 34-bit. That does not allow that. So you can choose the pipeline as mentioned. The HTTP version says 1.1. You can support 2 if you wanted to. WebSockets if you wanted to, always on. So here I think the service plan that I'm settling with is very low, hence why there's issues. Debugging, all those type of things. Affinity as well. Remember when we're talking about states, you can set it on or off. Looks like by default it's on. And yep, that's just about it in terms of configuration there. Then there's path mapping. So path mapping, essentially what that does is maps your path. Windows apps customizes the IIS handler mapping and virtual application and directories. Handler mapping allows you to use custom script processors to handle requests for specific file extensions. So if you have a specific way of handling, let's say, uh, JPG files, image files, or HTML files, or whatever, you'd specify that using this custom mapping, say, for example. So by default, each app has root path with a slash mapped to the wwroot on whatever drive this thing will be running on, essentially. So if your app root is in a different folder, so if it's not in the root folder or a repository has multiple applications, you can edit and add virtual applications and directories. To mark a virtual directory as a web application, get the directory checkbox when adding a new virtual application in the path mapping. So that's that. That's what we were talking about. There's the virtual path set up to that. Then mapper handling, this is, let's say, what you want to do. If you wanted to execute a script on a URL or something, that's that. You wanted to handle certain types of file extension, that's that. Then what I wanted to do here was virtual application directory. So what they mean here is on the path itself, I can add, let's say, Digarabo. And on that physical path, I can say that Digarabo. I don't know why. Yeah. While denying that, maybe I need to actually use that. So physical path, that's that. After side root, I can say Digarabo. Then after that, I can put a virtual path and say Digarabo. Then if I want this thing to be a directory, then I can set it as a directory. If not, if I wanted this thing to be effectively a web app of some sort, then I untick that. That will create what do you call with that I can essentially navigate to, which is of application type. So if I edited that and put it as directory, that tab will change and say directory. And yep, that's pretty much it. And here we are dealing with Linux and container applications. Being cognizant of type. There on Linux and containerized apps, you can add custom storage to your containerized apps. Use new storage mount and configure custom storage. So there's name, configuration options, storage account, storage type, storage container, shared name, access key, and mount path. Then to enable diagnostic logging, there are built-in diagnostics to assist with debugging your service app. So there's different levels to this. So diagnostic logging types on the platform. Actually, I think this I'll cover in a separate video as we are running more and more on time. Cool.